This is an event that's very close to my heart. I would like to begin today's conversation by thanking my own gurus and teachers because it has been their teachings and guidance that have led me on my own journey of working to help create better opportunities for others. I would like to set some context as to why today's event around helping shape a better future is important. We, the members of YFlow, come from privilege. The privilege of a good education, of continuous learning opportunities, of stable families who support us, of reinventing ourselves in a world that's constantly changing. These abilities allow us to thrive, to become leaders and decision makers. And we are doing some phenomenal work in our individual roles. Now imagine if every girl child born in this city or this country were to have these opportunities and this support. Imagine the potential of that empowered young girl and the future she can shape. As you think about that multiplier effect, let me talk a little bit about our panel today. I cannot thank our panelists enough for agreeing to share the amazing impact work they do. Each one of them has been a friend, guide, and mentor to me at different stages of my life. When I was a very young girl, I looked up to this family friend and everything she was and the college she went to, and I aspired to be like her, and that was Priyanka Di. When I got married, there was somebody who was constantly supporting me in that journey from meeting my husband till the wedding day and beyond, and navigating such a big family, and that was Avantika Chachi. Then I met Vasvi when I first entered YFlow and Flow, and since then she's always been there to support everything I want to do here. And Atashi was my first friend at YFlow and also the one who egged me on to take on this role. So thank you so much for being here. As past chairpersons of YFlow, they have sat where you sit today. And from there to the work they do today to create a better future is a journey that each one of you can make as well. To begin this conversation, I would like to invite Dr. Nisha Dhawan, Vice President, Impact and Influence at Empower, on stage. Nisha is our moderator for the afternoon. She is passionate about amplifying the voices of girls, financial inclusion, and gender equity. In her role at Empower, she works to build collaborations to influence the sector through building evidence, co-learning, and sharing. Nisha began her career working at Deutsche Bank and Barclays in London. She holds a PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, in sociology. So, Nisha, over to you.
Hello? Hello? Perfect. All right. It's always more fun with technical difficulties. Good afternoon, everyone, and what an amazing room. It is such a testament to see you all here. To meaningfully want to engage with philanthropy and to be inspired by our panelists. I want to give a huge congratulations and a shout out to Aradhana, who in her first month as chair has brought us all together. And that too, about something as meaningful. And to all of our panelists, to Vasvi, Priyanka, Avantika, and to Atashi, it has been such an amazing journey getting to know you in planning this panel, and I could not be more excited. You've inspired me. I'm sure you will inspire so much of this room today. And what's really interesting is your philanthropic journeys have spanned industries, geographies, and focus areas. And for that reason, I think we all have a phenomenal panel for you today. But before we begin, and I formally invite you all up and we engage in conversation, I want to begin with a small exercise for everybody in the room. On your chairs, you would have found a pencil and some pieces of paper. Can you grab 2 of those pieces of paper, please? And we have extras in case you can't find yours. Do it. You don't have to. All right, has everyone got them? So as we're getting our pieces of paper, what I'd like you to do is on the one piece of paper, I want you to take a moment, close your eyes, look into your heart, and really think about what is that one issue area that you are most passionate about? Is it women and girls? Is it arts and preserving culture? Is it climate change? Is it rural livelihoods? Is it animal welfare? And it can be different for every single one of us. The joke I always tell is my 7-year-old daughter, every Diwali, I ask her to take out money from her allowance. And she has yet to give Empower any money because every year she gives money to Friendicos because the most important thing in her life is dogs. So it can be unique to the person sitting next to you. So just take that minute and write on your piece of paper, what is the one thing that really connects you to wanting to give back? All right, and for those of you who have already written on that first piece of paper, on that second piece of paper, I want you to write down what's a challenge. If you've already begun your philanthropic journey, what is a struggle that you have? If you are at the beginning of that journey, what's stopping you? What's that challenge? And these challenges are all real, they're bona fide. So think about what that is. What is that to you? What's stopping you? What's limiting you? So the reason why we're doing that is we want this panel to truly have a purpose, and we're standing behind the fact that we believe this will be a motivational and inspirational panel because of the journey that our panelists have taken. So keep those papers with you. We're not going to do anything with them right now, and we'll revisit them in about an hour and a half's time, okay? So before we actually embark on the panel, I've been asked to sort of set the stage and share a couple of key trends in philanthropy. And I have a bit of a cheat sheet because luckily I've just come back from Skoll World Forum, which takes place in Oxford University every year. And it brings together 1,300 leaders from the world of social impact. It's a by invite only event, and I've been honored to have been invited for 2 years in a row. And the sort of 2 or 3 key trends that I want to share with you is number 1 is the power of domestic philanthropy. And what we mean by that is I'm sure you've seen in the news that not only the US government, but also the Dutch, the Europeans, and the French have considerably cut their funding to aid and aid-related projects in the course of the past 3 months. So 2025 has seen of all of the money in the world for social causes has been cut by more than half. And the one big trend at Skoll has actually been that we need to look internally. We don't need funding to come in from Europe and the United States and the Netherlands for India, right? We need to look inwards and we need to rely more meaningfully on domestic philanthropy. The second key piece that's come out is that right now, in this moment, and this is why I'm so excited about this amazing panel of women, is that there is a $7.2 trillion wealth transfer going on. And what we mean is wealth is moving from one generation to the other, and that magnitude is $7.2 million in the next 10 years. But here's the most important and inspiring part of it, is for the first time, that money is landing into the hands of women. The generation before this did not have the agency, did not have the access, did not have the space, did not have the rights to be able to program money for philanthropy. Okay, so with this wealth transfer, it is ushering in a new era of giving that is feminine, that is a unique lens, that speaks to perhaps some of the challenges that we have felt in our life. But giving has uniquely changed. The third piece is communities and collaborative giving, that you can only come together if you have community. And I think people need to learn a lot about community from the women in this room. And that when you come together and you pool your funding together, the effect that you can have is not just a sum of your parts. It's far greater than the sum of your parts, which is why we're so excited to be here and to be partnering with YFlow, with all of you. So the last thing I'm going to say is let's bring this home and talk about India. Giving is so deeply entrenched in terms of who we are. Okay? If something good happens, what do? You give. If something bad happens, what do? If somebody is born, what do? If somebody dies, what do? Exactly. We don't need to have a conversation about the importance of giving. Every single one of us know that already. It is deeply entrenched in our DNA. You don't need to hear that lecture from me, right? And you don't need to hear that from any of our panelists. And here's the other really cool and very important bit. I have a question for the room. A cup of Vietnamese cold coffee for the winner, on me, except not. Who is the greatest philanthropist of all time? Who has given more money than anybody else ever? Who? I know the answer. I asked this, I was at a panel at the London School of Economics last week, and everyone was like, of course it's Bill and Melinda. And I'm like, no, buddies, it's Jamshedji Tata. Let's just take a minute and recognize that. Okay, so we are actually market leaders in giving, and we historically have. And Jamshedji Tata gave from his family, right? It was before CSR rules. It was before philanthropy was a thing. And it still is one of the greatest sources of giving. And then finally, what I would say is, I'm going to take a minute so as Aradhana said, I'm a reformed banker. I know there's many of you in the room, but I studied development. I worked in finance, and I began my journey in philanthropy and in the social impact space about 15 years ago. And I work at an organization called Empower. Empower began in a community, just like this one. Just like this one. It was a community, it was a collective of people who wanted to give back. Except the community that we started with was investment bankers in New York City, so slightly different. But it was actually a group of people working in emerging markets trading who wanted to give back to the economies where they wanted to work. And it came together as such a small idea. It was 7 $5,000 checks that started Empower in the year 2000. Today, we raise $11 million a year, and we support 165 local partners in 15 countries around the world. Ideas. Collaboratives can start really small, but they leave this immense and important legacy. And because of that belief of individuals in us, today we are market leaders in the girls and gender space. That is why we were invited to SKOL. That is why we speak at the United Nations Commission for Women. That is why we speak at the United Nations General Assembly. It's because of our programmatic work on girls. But it all started with a room just like this one 25 years ago, Saat Samundar Par. All right, so you've heard more than enough from me, and I don't want to bore you any longer. So, on that note, can I please invite our amazing panelists, Vaspi, Priyanka, Avantika, and Atashi? I'd love to welcome you to the stage. All right. How's everyone doing? Does everyone have a working mic before we start? No. Let's start there.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
I think it's working.
Is this
Is it working?
Is it working? No?
Is it?
That could just be me.
I was serious about it being more fun when there's tech difficulties, everyone. So you know when things are most easy as a moderator is when stories are amazing and there's powerful stories in the room. So my life is very easy. The second reason why things are very easy as a moderator is when you ask the same question to every panelist to begin. So there's my trick, people. So Vaspi, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about your journey in philanthropy? Because that's what we're talking about today. The beating heart of this is our individual journeys in philanthropy. So tell me more about yours.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, Aradhna, and thank you, Biflow, for having us here. It's always so special for me to be back at Biflow as a speaker. I was right here where Aradhna is exactly 15 years ago when I was the chair. So this is a very, very special place and a very special community for me. I started my, I also want to talking about community. I just want to say that I have an amazing community of friends who were there in 2010 when I was the Biflow chair in the audience. They were there when I was Flow president, and they are here today. So I think a big shout out for women and communities. Thank you, guys. Just to start with, I just want to say that I got married in a very, very long time ago, 30 years ago. And I got married into a family where philanthropy was very much in the DNA of the family. This is the Sriram family. Urvi is also part of the same family. And the founder of our group, which was Sir Sriram, pre-independence, he was a very small-built man, but he had great visions for India. So pre-independence, he started like Sriram College for Commerce. Then he started Lady Sriram College, which was an unknown thing, you know, women's college just for women. You know, women even going to college was unusual. Sriram Center for Science and Research, Kamani Auditorium, Bharatiya Kala Kendra, many other things like that. So he had a vision for education, art and culture, business, economy. I think many people don't know that the land on which FICCI Federation House sits was actually donated by him. So he had this big vision and big plans for India. And so that is sort of the legacy that I inherited, and a legacy that we take very, very seriously. Our company is SRF Limited, and we have a foundation in that where we are supporting 650 schools for underserved communities across 39 geographies, where we are supporting them with education and with skilling. The Sriram schools, which most people don't know, are actually part of the SRF Foundation. They are not-for-profit institutions. They are fully supported by us. And 25% of the schools are what RTE calls the economically weaker section, a word that we never use. We call them scholars. So we are supporting those also. And RTE just says that you have to support them for tuition. But we are going way above that and supporting them for everything so that there is no difference amongst them and the regular students. So lunch, bus, school fees, school trips, everything. So it's all very much part of the DNA of the family. And education has always been at the core of that. my husband and I, we had a personal lived experience with our elder daughter, where she was, when she was just sort of finishing high school, she was, not looking happy. And well, long story short, we realized that she was depressed. And that was something that it was not something that we had ever come across. And I'm talking pre-COVID times, where it was not a conversation. It was not something that was happening in every family. We were not sure where to go, what to do. Nobody spoke about these things. We found the right help, and we realized that how life-changing the right help can be. And this kind of brought our attention to the world of mental health in India, and how we decided that this is the next thing that we want to do. We felt that the time had come for people to have this conversation, for people to step up and help in building the ecosystem of mental health in our country. Because, I don't know how many of you people know, but there is a access gap of 95% in healthcare. So if 5 in 100 people at the max would be able to access mental health care, 1/3 of all depressions and suicides are Indians. 50 million plus Indian kids are suffering from depression. And that is only the reported numbers. There must be so many more that are unreported. Mental health cuts across geographies, economic stratas. What doesn't matter where you are, what you are doing, it actually affects everybody. So my husband and I decided that this is where we want to now put our time, effort, and our personal philanthropy. And we came up with the India Mental Health Alliance, where we are trying to solve for this by creating an alliance, which is a collaborative framework, where we're bringing in people who are working in the mental health space, but also people working cross-sectorally, and like a whole ecosystem building, and also enhancing capacities of people like mental health practitioners and support systems, like maybe schools, like workplaces. And there are many things, and I can speak about this forever, but I won't take any more time.
Amazing. And I think what's so phenomenal about your journey is you've taken something that is so deeply entrenched in the DNA of your family, and you've really moved from what is visible, schools, infrastructure, to what is less tangible, right? And I think what you've highlighted in the why of your journey and how you've got there is you've made that pivot because of what moved your heartstrings. First piece of paper, everybody. So I think that's phenomenal. So, just sticking on this theme of the why and the how, Priyanka, I'd like to move to you now, because I think you have really, there's a multiplicity of ways, and I've just been so inspired hearing from all of you about the number of ways that you've worked on. But tell us your story. Tell us why and tell us how.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, Aradhana. And thank you, YFlow. Really, it feels like I'm coming back home and addressing all of you. So really, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And I want to thank my son who's here, who's my only family custodian right here. Thanks, Nav, for being here. And the only male member, I guess, in the room besides the photographers. So thank you. I think I grew up not knowing or ever hearing this word philanthropy. And really for us, because, it was a way of life. And giving came as second nature. When I look back at my journey, I can think of it in 3 acts: a personal calling, family traditions, and institutional scaling. So if, I look at my personal journey, it started quite young. I suffered from child molestation, and I had 2 choices: either to live with that pain or to use it as a catalyst for change, and to not just heal myself through giving, but also heal others in my journey of life. And the seeds were sown, and which have grown into the path that kind of unfolded in the future with that. Growing up in a school in Singapore, in United World College, service came to us very naturally. It was part of our curriculum, just like you studied math, physics, science. You also had 2 periods in your day where you had to give back, whether it was to an old age home or it was fundraising for some victims across the world. And I got very involved with a school in Nepal where we would come during our breaks and teach children in this little school in the mountains, in the Annapurna Mountains. And I learned through these experiences that giving is not just about money. Giving is, it can be with your time, can be with your skills, can be with your just your empathy. And giving can also just be with your presence and your belief. I'll fast forward a little bit, and after my college, I moved back to India once I got married. And in Delhi, my family got associated with a very well-known NGO called Akshay Patra, which provides midday meals across the country. At the time when we got involved, they were providing close to 20,000-30,000 meals a day, which is quite phenomenal also for at that time. And their model looked like it had a real potential for scale. And when you provide a midday meal, I'm not sure how many of you know this, but if you provide a hot meal, children come to school. As a result of children coming to school, the girl child starts coming to school. She doesn't miss school, she doesn't skip years, and she ends up matriculating. Most children end up matriculating, which is a huge thing for a country like ours. So it has a huge multiplier effect. And here my finance background met with my values and a desire to do better. So, I worked with helping them with their procurement, with economies of scale. I helped them invest their reserves. And I also worked with them on asset management. Really the question I was trying to answer was very simple, that this kitchen, which feeds thousands of children every month, how do we make it self-sustaining, that it is not dependent on charity the next month for the meals that it is providing? And, from starting off working with them, we've now been able to serve 1 billion meals over the last 20 years. And Akshay Patra has scaled across the world. We have kitchens in London and Africa as well. But I noticed a missing link. And though children were submatriculating till class 10, there were those children who would not be able to afford higher education. And, not get out of the poverty cycle, not move their families out of the poverty cycle as a result. So, this caused me to pivot our focus. And because of the institutions and the family institutions which we were able to access and the scale that we were able to access, we offered a scholarship and a fellowship program to get children to access higher education along with soft skills training, which made them job ready. So through this program, around 3 lakh children have benefited across the country. And we also worked, because of our domain knowledge in logistics and transportation, we developed a curriculum for children in grade 11 and 12, which got CBSE accredited. And as a result, children who come out of this program, they are walking out of school into a real job. So it was a huge multiplier, and it is a huge multiplier. We also work with training children to go for the Olympics in weightlifting, boxing, and in archery. And many children have already, due to COVID, we had to stop for a few years, but many of our students have won medals at the Commonwealth Game, at national and international events, and we've had contenders at the Olympics. We won the bronze, but we're waiting for the gold to come home as well. And I think, from service delivery, I think my journey moved towards system transformation. And, from food to education to skilling and jobs, I think there's been quite an interesting pivot. And I think that's necessarily happened because you can't transform a life halfway. And now the focus has expanded to the environment and sustainability, where, my children and my husband and I are very deeply involved in, working towards mitigating the negative effects of climate change. And, I'd be happy to talk about this. There's a lot I can share in this area. And, our giving and my giving has moved from people to the planet now. And I also would like to say that, giving has become my family's love language. And it's really something that we pivot around as a family. This is what our dinner conversations are about. This is what I talk to my son in the US who's studying there right now, because, giving has just become such an intrinsic part of what makes us thrive as a family. And it really has been a very fulfilling journey, though there's miles to go, but it has been a very rewarding journey so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I feel like I'm going to quote you on giving has become my love language. That's beautiful. But I do want to say, first of all, thank you for your bravery in sharing your story from the very beginning. I think the 2 or 3 key points that really come up is your journey can pivot and one thing can lead to the other, which leads to the other, which I think is phenomenal. You don't have to commit to one thing. And Avantika, we're going to hear that from you as well shortly. The second is how you've leveraged what you know to grow it, to scale it, I think is really phenomenal. So thank you so much for that. So Avantika, over to you. We, and I think, and this is what's so amazing about this panel, it's so multivariate. We've moved from mental health and education to really looking at people and planet, or people to planet, let's say that. And now you're gonna share another glimpse with us. So tell us about your journey and how.
Thank you for being here, and thank you, Radna, for getting all of us together for such a, I think, need-based discussion, because I think it's something that touches everyone's lives. And it's something that, when you start, your children take on with you, and then you really create a legacy of giving through it, which I think is very pivotal. And I think, with YFlow, it's very important that if we bring up our children, teaching them, letting them observe giving as a part of our culture and our DNA, it'll really have that multiplier effect that India as a civilization has. So to say I've been very privileged to be born in a family and got married in a family where Dharmada was very important. So I have 4 of my family members here, very happy to have them, and a lot of people who are my family by heart also. So I think my journey started in this family as, as you said, when we're happy we give, when we're sad we give, when someone is born we give, when someone passes away we give. So giving is such an important part of my life. So I would put giving into 3 buckets for me. There's corporate giving, there's collective giving, and individual. So I'd like to start with my story on individual giving. It used to be very random, some pyao somewhere, some dharamshala happening, educating someone's children, putting that little thing. So you did a lot of random little things. And then when you sat back, you said, what have I done? Is there any impact? Each of them was very important, but there was no focus, no strategy to the giving. So I remember one panel discussion where I was YFlow chair and Shubha Mudgal mentioning that you need to patronize the arts. And I looked at her and I said, Shubhaji, when you have big foundations, when you have big people giving, it's easy. How can I as an individual contribute to it? I have my allowance. What can I do with that? So she looked at me and said, you give gifts? I was like, yes. So she said, you give Diwali gifts? I was like, yeah. She's like, what do you do? I said, sometimes it's chocolate, sometimes it's meva, sometimes it's fruit. So she said, can you patronize the arts? The gift you give, can it promote an artisan, an artist in any manner? So I said, okay, this sounds really interesting. And from there, I started this little journey, which was curating gifts, where, I found out about an art form, found out about an artisan. I put their details together whenever I gifted with their contact information, saying that in case you like this gift, this is an art form, it's dying. Can you support it? If you like it, please contact this artisan and take it from there. So it started with small steps. It started, and then I started realizing that this is a space I enjoyed. I loved the arts, I loved the culture. And as a child, I loved monuments and old monuments. And as all of you might have gone overseas and said, there's a small stone or a wall out there and it's glorified to another level. And here we have a khazana of monuments. And, it's just not presented that well. So I think sometimes when you get in with a passion and you don't even know how to do it, you just throw the hat over the wall and say, let's just walk along and we learn on the way. So it was one of my events, which I can describe to you later. And we came up with this unique opportunity to partner when the government came up with a scheme saying, be a Monument Mitra. It's a public-private partnership. And you had to put in vision bids. So not knowing anything, we put in a vision bid for the Red Fort. So this is 2018 January, and we had a lot of companies which were very well known in giving. Somehow things went on. We learnt on the way, COVID struck. But through our journey, we've, created a museum at the Red Fort. We have a show today called Jai Hind, which is regarded as one of the top 5 shows in the world by National Geographic. For a year, we did work with Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, where post-COVID, when artisans were out of work, we created Bharat Bhagya Vidhata, which was a 10-day Red Fort festival where we actually called in all the artisans and craftsmen from all over the country, where Vasvi really helped me put it together. And we paid for them to come in. We gave them space free, and whatever they made, they took back with them. So these are small steps that we worked, and our journey today now, I must say it's wonderful. We are Monument Mitras for 5 monuments across Delhi. So we have the Red Fort, the Purana Killa, the Humayun's tomb, the Safdarjung tomb, and the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. And our vision is to make these monuments cultural hubs, to create the cultural economy, help the local people come up, promote the tourism within India, and most importantly, get our next generation to be proud of their roots. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first, I know I meant to sum up what you said.
And make them living learning spaces.
Yes, thank
Exactly. I love it. I love it. That this is community, people. No, but I mean, I want to. Before I sum up, I just want to say thank you, as a mom, because you have given my kids a childhood that they might not have had it not been for you. So thank you. But I think, the two things that really come out from your story and your journey is the importance of living that legacy, right? One is you've grown up within it and you're paying it forward. You're bringing, it's intergenerational, but it's also the legacy of who we are, right? And holding on to things that might otherwise be forgotten, right? Holding on to the spaces and places that make Delhi who it is. The other thing that I think is really interesting is your journey, and I didn't know this from our pre-panel, began with one conversation at a Y-Flow panel, which is also pretty amazing, that it emanated in a room very similar to this one. All right, so Atashi, over to you. We're now moving to viewing giving from the lens of rural livelihoods, which is an entirely different space. So tell us about your why and how that led to your how.
Good evening, everyone. Aradhna, I think I'm very inspired by the 3 ladies on the dais with me. My journey has just about started, but I can share with you how I got where I got. Apart from actually studying in rural Rajasthan in Ajmer, we had adopted village Telonia, which actually was a self-sufficient village back in the 90s. And we used to get to volunteer there. So some of us, and my actually started because on Saturdays you could leave campus. That was the only day you could leave a boarding school campus. So we started working there, and it was very simple. You were teaching the villagers about sanitization and healthcare, something as basic as that. And what it led to was, there was another village, Data, which was again adopted by Mayo, and we were trying to replicate that format over there. So it was a very interesting way to see how rural lives could transform even back then. Fast forward 2010, my first visit to the factory with my mom-in-law. And I was very young and very naive, I must say, because I just come back, I'd gotten married. And so every 50 meters, this was a drive from Udaipur to Sirohi. It's a very, very backward area in Rajasthan, and a lot of tribals there. And every 50 meters, I saw this one older woman standing with young women, young girls, like maybe 1, maybe 2. Some were standing with 3. And after a few passed, And I'm thinking this is the bus route. Maybe they're going somewhere. Maybe the bus will stop. I just asked my mom-in-law, I said, why are they standing here, Ma? You know, why are they on this highway? Because it's evening, it's going to get dark. And she also asked the manager who'd come to collect us that why are they standing here? And he was very ashamed to tell us. What we later realized was that these mothers were selling their daughters to the truck drivers for something as less as 50 rupees to 100 rupees for an hour. It was the national highway. And I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about that. And that is how they were earning their money. And so when we reached our factory, she called for the ones who were closest to our factory that get them, because she was so livid, you know, being a woman and being a mother. She was just, and I was feeling so ashamed. I said, I just couldn't understand how could a mother put a child through that, her own daughter, right? They were her own daughters. That is, I think, where our tryst with rural development started for us. So I got married into this family where, of course, as legacies Vasvi spoke about, we had a lot of temples, we do a lot of dharamshalas, we had a lot of hospitals and schools. But rural development was not looked into so intrinsically. But for us, it started there. That's when we realized that empowering women was important, giving them skills to earn their money in actual ways that can sustain them was important. And by just opening schools and hospitals was not enough. I think we needed to do a little bit more. We needed to see change. And today we have 250 villages that we are supporting. We are directly impacting 22 lakh people. It's not a very big number, but it's something that we are starting with. We have 3.5 lakh women who we have skilled and placed. And we actually see that change. So now today, fast forward 25 in 15 years, these are numbers which I can tell you. And I can tell you that we've skilled and we've given them, we make sure that they go to schools and there is other way of livelihood. And that is where at least my journey started. And I have a long way to go, but I'm assuming that we are doing some work in lots of rural parts. And I think that is where collaborative work also works. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Atishi, I think your story starts with that one moment of change for all of you, right? And I think it resonates because each of you have started, and I just want to say thank you for digging very deep, for being vulnerable and for sharing that. The other thing is those little incremental changes can one day result in the numbers that you've shared with us. And that's such a powerful part of this journey. Before I go on, I just want everyone to take a minute and give a round of applause to all of the panelists. I always knew that I was going to get inspired moderating this panel. We've had the privilege of talking before, but I can tell you that I am moved, and I've spent like 20 years in this space. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to be a proper moderator and start asking different questions. Look at that. So I want to sort of double click on this idea of collaboration. So this is to both Avantika and to Vasvi. Can you think of ways that you've collaborated with others, and why is that important? Why not do it alone?
So in our thing about collective philanthropy, before we started onto the journey of Sabhyata with the monuments, we had people come up to us who were very passionate, highly value-driven. And so I think our first journey through Avni Foundation, which is what I chair, it's a personal foundation for my husband and me. And our first forays was in the field of education with the Ashoka University. When Ashish Dhawan was founding the university, we gave our first gift to Ashoka as a part of a founder trustee. And we realized that it's so important when people have a vision that is bigger than themselves, and passion and the ability to work on it. And it's good that, it's not about just doing something that you believe in. And if it's something that you believe in and someone can really do it well, just join hands and support that cause. So we started on a collective philanthropy journey through Ashoka. Then we moved on to this field of arts when Serendipity Art Festival was coming in. Sunil Munjal's a dear friend. And the minute Sunil told us about this festival, we were like, This is something that is amazing. And if for those of you who haven't gone, I highly recommend go see the Serendipity Arts Festival in Goa. It happens in December, I think 13th, 14th it starts. It's like almost a 10-day festival. It's an amazing celebration of the arts. And then we moved on to this museum that my cousin brother opened in Bangalore. It's called the Museum of Arts and Photography, MAP. So these are 3 collective philanthropy projects that we have supported. Learning from this, Sabhyata, which is the foundation that we're working with the monuments, is also a collective collaborative. So we think that heritage belongs to the world and not to us alone. And this is a foundation where we're looking for help, like Vasvi is actually one of my community, and Priyanka and everyone's here, but she helps me on a weekly basis. So we actually took people from different walks of life who actually excel, and they give us the time and their skills, which is the most precious part of it. And then we look for resources and collaborations with others. So that's us.
Amazing. And I think that's it. And it really speaks to, bringing people together of different skill sets, right? Which I think has a lot to do with it. Vasvi has a lot to say about that. Tell me.
So I think collective philanthropy is really the way forward in philanthropy now. It is not just a buzzword. You can do so much by yourself, but you can do so much when others come together, right? And Ashoka University, as Avanti said, is one great example of that. I think Ashish really led the way. He got all of us, I think everybody on this panel is actually involved with Ashoka University in terms of being founders. And it was a really wonderful way to show us that that's possible. Otherwise everybody was doing their own silos and, everybody was making bathrooms and putting their father's name on it, But that's really the way it was. It's true, but that is the way it was. But this is a way where, it's a new way where you don't necessarily have to have that, right? So even an SRA Foundation, which is a fully funded CSR arm of our company, there are many people who come in and they want to support things. So it just goes to show that if you are doing a good job with what you're doing, there can be many people who come in, and if they have faith in what you are doing and you are transparent about it, it also inspires other people to come and join you. In India Mental Health Alliance, the whole philosophy is about collaboration. So it's called the India Mental Health Alliance. That's a very intentional name. We haven't called it Sri Ram this or Bharat Ram this or Ashish and Vasvi Foundation, very, very intentionally. We wanted it to be a collaborative space. We wanted it to be a space for everyone. We wanted it to be a space where people come in and learn, share, and collect knowledge, curate knowledge together for the mental health ecosystem of India. And for that, we have now we just started about a year ago. We are very new in this journey. We had hoped to get 30 people on board in our alliance, and very happy and proud to share that as of today, we have 106 people who have come on board. Thank you, thank you. We're very proud of that. And they are mental health organizations, they are cross-sectoral organizations, they are intermediary organizations, international organizations, and funders. So it's a great mix of people who are coming together to try and solve for a problem, right? And it's a wonderful way of doing things, and I really do believe that that is the way to do it. But you have to be open, you have to be transparent, you have to be welcoming, you have to be able to share all your data with other people.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that transparency, that equity, and also just bringing diverse stakeholders to the table. Absolutely. We're coming too. So now I'm gonna ask Priyanka and Atashi. Both of you talked about women and girls in some way, shape, or form. Girls' education, your moving story, Atashi. Tell me why it's important. Why should we care? Why is the women and girls story, the gender story, something that all of us need to keep front and center?
See, I think there are two things to it. One is when you educate a woman or a girl, you're educating a family. That's my intrinsic thought process. And when you're educating a man, it's an individual. So I think we come from that belief. And the idea was basically that we had to skill the women and make them self-reliant. And The other thing is, of course, my mother-in-law herself, her personal journey was very, very. She was thrown into the work at the age of 32, coming not from any kind of a business background, and she lost her husband very young. Her boys were really young, so she still feels the need is that every woman should know about finances. Every woman should be self-reliant. One of our biggest projects today is Project Jurav, which is basically a collaborative project with the Government of India. So the Government of India has schemes. We work in 5 states, and we have actually helped 3.5 lakh women with Project Jurav alone, where we only fill their forms up. We only help them tap onto the resources that should be theirs, which are all part of the government schemes. So it is not something that we are funding personally or something. It is something that the government has for them. We just help them with filling the forms, going to the right places, making sure that they can get the benefit out of it. And that is where at least our ethos is.
Thank you. Priyanka.
I think, taking on from what Atashi said, I think women need to invest in women, and that's the point I'd like to drive, because I think we are the ones who know what it's like to be a woman, to juggle between dreams, deadlines, diapers, and sometimes even doubt. To be ambitious, but not to sound too ambitious. To fight for that seat at the table, but then also be expected to serve tea at that table, because we know what it's like to be a woman. I think women need to invest in women. And women don't, investing in women is not charity. In my opinion, it's a strategy. Because, when you educate a girl child or you teach a child, statistics have shown that every year of extra education a girl gets, her income for life increases by 20%. So year on year, imagine the incremental multiplier that happens because of a girl getting educated. A girl who's educated is more likely to, have children later on in life, to be financially independent, and to pass on good education to her children as well, right? So again, you're looking at the cycle of perpetuity that gets, proposed with women who get empowered and educated. I also feel that women have, they don't need charity. They need investing. They need mentorship. They need, some sort of support in helping them navigate the challenges that they are facing. So if we collectively as women also try to make this an agenda in our giving, that we look at women as means of investment to bring about transformational change, I think there is a huge potential that can be unlocked as a result, and nation building can be really at the forefront. And also women are 50% of the population. So, and I don't know if any of you know, but the digital divide is really a gender divide. 30% of women do not have access to the internet. So imagine with AI and with technology taking away jobs, if we don't promote women, they're really going to be left behind. And not just economically, but even in terms of, a collective ethos for the entire country and the universe. Women have to really be at the forefront of it. And we as women have a responsibility to pass it on.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's really interesting in, some of the work that Empower is currently doing with Niti Aayog, that is actually what's coming up front and center. We can't talk about the India growth story. We cannot talk about, increased GDP per capita. We cannot talk about, year-on-year growth unless we are meaningfully engaging with and retaining women in education and livelihoods, right? And I think what you point out about the digital divide as well as basic access are so critical to that jigsaw coming together. So I can actually ask this question to every single person on this panel, except for Aradhna, which is that you've been a past YFlow chair. So can you share more about the power and potential of this community? So Avantika, I'm going to ask you to answer this, but to everybody else on this panel, if you have something to add, I want to open it up to you as well.
So I think this is where I can say my giving journey began. And I think for me, it has been an immense learning. And it's thanks to these two beautiful women who are my soul sisters here, who made sure that I got into this space and took up this leadership. And I was like, I'm happy working on my own. And they're like, no, you need to come on. So I'm like, okay. And I had both of them, and they have my back 24/7, which is one of the most precious gifts that I've got, coming into this space, putting yourself out there, going into something that is uncomfortable, something where you don't know, it's a path that you've never walked, collaborating with people, learning the humility of saying, help me, guide me. I think that is something this space has taught me. Learning to reach out to people, learning from people at every walk. I learned so much from what Tatashi said. You learn so much from what Aradhana is taking up as an initiative. You learn so much from every single person. So I think YFlow has taught me that everyone is a guru and there's so much to learn from. Thank you.
That's amazing. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I'm going to add something. So YFlow, for me, started this, I learned from my peers as well. We started doing CSR at YFlow in Itiva's year. She was a past chair before me. There was Trupti and there was Anchal. I still remember we raised 60 lakhs in my year. We did collaborative CSR work in my year for that much. And I feel like the community, it is that's where the funds came from. We were able to change about 5 SDMC schools. Back then we were running a YFlow Vatika, which was a creche. So we did a lot of work for women and children back then as well. We in fact were driven out of a village in Haryana because the Khap Panchayat said that you're spoiling the women. This was the committee back then. So it was a big learning,
Clearly were achieving what you set out to do.
Yeah. So I feel like YFlow, of course, it's a big learning, and women together can really drive change. They can.
That's fantastic. So
I just wanted to add to that, saying that I think YFlow, like any organization, is a very vibrant community. But what you get out of it is what you put into it. So, I would really urge each of you, I think because we stepped forward, we said we will take on that responsibility, we will put everything aside for that 1 year and do this role. Because that's what it actually takes, as Aradhana will find out very soon. But because we put up a hand and we did that, we got so much out of it. And so much out of it meant learnings and wonderful lifelong friendships. There's in my flow and YFlow journey, I think what I left with was beautiful relationships. And so I would urge all of you to, engage as much as possible, come as much as possible, lift up your hand and volunteer to do things. And Aradhana has, sort of along with Empower already curated a wonderful program, 5 different opportunities for you all. I would really say explore it, see what resonates with you. Make sure it's something that resonates with you, because that is really important. And say yes, give it a shot and put yourself out there. Then you'll get the most out of YFlow.
I just want to add that, I think YFlow as a community is very powerful because it creates ripples. Each individual's success is not just our success, whether it's in business, whether it's in personal life, it's in social philanthropy. It rubs on to everybody in the community. And, through a supportive network, through inspiring others, and also in terms of activating new energy. So, the power of community is far greater than an individual. It really is the sum of its parts, and the ripples can be felt, and I felt it during my YFlow journey for sure.
So I knew that everyone would have something to say, and I'm so glad I opened that out. So I think maybe we should reframe if you educate a woman, you educate an entire family. If a woman takes the first foray into philanthropy, she's bringing a legacy with her. She's bringing the generation above and the generation below with her. And it is causing that ripple effect, which is fantastic. Okay, so I'm actually going to open the last question up very quickly to everybody too, because, sorry I'm putting you on the spot, but I am, and you're so gracious and amazing. So my last question for everyone in any order is, you've been at the forefront of philanthropy for so long. what is your dream for the future? So, Vasvi, I'm going to start with you, but opened up to Priyanka as well. I would definitely want to hear from you, but Avanti and Atashi, please tell me what you think.
I think my vision for philanthropy is that everyone, no matter who they are, where they are, and what they can do, everyone should just step forward and do whatever they can. They should not wait. There's an organization whose advisory I am on again. It's called Accelerate India Philanthropy. And their tagline is, give now, give better, and give more. So whatever is possible, I think we should all step up and do. As I said earlier, find a cause that resonates with you. So for instance, how I got into mental health, I shared with you. Cancer, I lost my mother-in-law and my father to cancer. So cancer care is something very close to my heart. I'm from the city of Banaras, so doing something, supporting something over there is very close to my heart. So find whatever is close to your heart and say, I'm going to make a difference today.
Priyanka?
Thank you, Vasvi. You know, to answer this question, I will have to share a little bit about my focus on sustainability and environment, because that leads me to my dream for the future. And, you know, I did mention that, you know, we have forayed into the environment and, you know, working in traditional classical pillars like education, empowerment, skilling, something unexpected happened. My children actually came back from school one day and said that the landfill is on fire and the waste that we are producing from our house is causing this fire, and it's the air that we are breathing, and I'm getting asthma and I'm not being able to go out there and play football. So there's something I want to do about this. And this was the genesis of their NGO called One Step Greener, which works with waste management, recycling, and urban afforestation. And watching them grow this from a grassroots initiative to something that has received global acclaim was not just humbling, but it was also very electrifying. So they brought the issue of climate change at center focus in my house. You know, it was staring at my face, and they also made me aware that, you know, climate change is not something that we have to tackle for the future, but it is our present that needs to be, you know, climate change needs to be tackled right now, here and now. So all credit to them, you know, climate change became a big focus and is now, you know, like a family focus between my husband, me, and the two boys. We have a fund which funds things on carbon markets and philanthropy in the climate space, because it is such an urgent need that it made me realize that all the work that I'm doing, whether it's education, whether it's empowerment, it's skilling, is all on shaky ground if the earth beneath it is burning. And, you know, with 1.4 million people dying out of air pollution in India every year, it's really not a crisis we can avoid or ignore, and it is very, very imminent to take care of it. So, given that background, my dream for the future is to have youth not as the leaders of tomorrow, but as the leaders of today. For change makers, for them to have a seat at the table today. Because I've seen through my two boys what a huge impact two children can make. And, you know, seeing them having a seat at various, you know, from parliaments to the UN, and having them speak to dignitaries, and the kind of attention that the two of them have received and the change they've been able to bring about as a result of that, I think, you know, if we gave that opportunity to more youth, we would have a very different world than the one that we have today. So my first dream is to see youth leading, being at the forefront of change and not the leaders of just tomorrow. My second dream is to see that sustainability is not a side project, and it becomes a focus for each of us in whichever capacity, and it becomes the forefront of our lives in the way we live, in the way we conduct our work, and in the way we govern our cities and countries. Because really, if there is no planet, what are we living for? We need to take care of this you know, amazing gift of the earth that we have all inherited together and we share as a common resource. So those two would be my big dreams, and I also hope that the future holds where all these movements become deeply personal for each one of us, you know, and where we operate from hope and not fear. And, you know, the hope that a child has when he plants a sapling and he says, this is for tomorrow. And that's the future I hope for, that, you know, where we are all guided with tremendous hope and with a spring beneath our feet, and we look forward to bringing about this change together of this common inheritance that we have, we call Earth, we call our home.
Thank you so much. And it's actually music to our ears here at Empower, because we are actually governed by a Girls Advisory Council. So I always say, who is the greatest expert in the lives of girls? Is it me because I have a fancy doctor title at the beginning of my name? Or is it girls themselves? Yeah. Right? And so our governance model in India is all of our news sourcing is actually finalized by a group of adolescent girls who say this is what's important to us. So an 1,000% agreement with their leaders of today. And, congratulations, is your son in the room, to making this happen. So huge congratulations to you as well.
We all learn from our elders, but these two have taught me more than anybody else has taught me in my life.
100%. I think all the moms can attest to that.
I think, it's children like Vihan and Nav who make us proud to have them in our lives.
All right. Okay, let's not I was going to, but no, we won't. All right. Well, thank you all. And Atashi and Avantika,
Would you guys
do you
like
want
to
to say
say
a few
something?
words?
Yeah. I think we have a long way to go, but I do see a self-sustained rural India where they are culturally and ethically still in inclination with the olden times. I do see that.
That's beautiful.
And I would just say, when you ask me for my dream, it's children who learn to give back and who grow up. You teach them to succeed, you teach them to grow, you teach them to compete, to be better people. But I would say, let's bring our children up with a legacy of giving. Let's bring that core of India with the dharmata that we had in us, that culture. We're the only existing civilization from the ancient world that is still thriving with our values. So my dream is that we take those roots of ours and we fly, and we teach all our children to cherish their roots and fly ahead to a limitless horizon.
Thank you so much. What phenomenal dreams. I'm going to add mine, which is, and it's happening right now, which is women need to be at the forefront of this. We cannot be waiting for dad or father-in-laws or husbands or sons to be saying, this is what I'm passionate about and this is the change I want to make in the world. That's my dream. And it's happening. It's happening right here. It's happening right now. And on that note, we heard from you at the very beginning, Aradhna, but before I ask you the question, I want to actually say that you have an amazing chair this year. Here is somebody who we've had a professional partnership, we have a friendship, there is a lot of holding each other up in many, many different ways. And I really, for you to bring this all together, for you to bring all of us into this space and to talk about something so meaningfully and so beautifully, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, for sure. So,
Thank you so much.
So my question as I hand over to you is, as the YFlow chair this year, you have something very, very special in mind for your presidency. So take us away and tell us more.
So thank you, Nisha, for that compliment. And, what a journey we've been on with these conversations. I mean, who's not got goosebumps? Who's not feeling inspired? So, over the years in YFlow, as Atashi mentioned, we've often reached out to our members that, can you help us donate stationery, clothes, plant trees, help a school build a library. And, our members have responded overwhelmingly and they have supported us every time we have asked. So looking at that, the committee and I thought that maybe this is the moment to start our members on a new journey of giving. On a journey where, yes, these incremental things do make a difference, but how can we come together to make a significant impact and really transform the lives of young girls in our city. So we began to think that how can we do this? How can we put it together? It sounds very abstract. So we've literally made it very concrete for you. We've partnered with Empower this year. We've got a partnership fund with them. And through that fund, we are trying to support young girls in the city of Delhi, specifically so that everybody can see what's going on in the ground. We want to help them build leadership skills. We want to help them become decision makers. We want them to take STEM careers, because when they choose a STEM career, they're more likely to be financially independent. And we're doing it with organizations who are deeply connected to the community. They know what they're doing. Empower brings global expertise. They bring financial transparency. They're willing to hold each one of our hands through this journey, meet us separately, talk to us, make us visit some of these communities, meet these girls. So with this Empower YFlow Partnership Fund, I appeal to all of you that please engage with us today and over the next year at every single YFlow event. We will have their presence. They are available anytime. Communicate with them, find what you find interesting, give to the fund, start your journey. Because when we give collectively, we can really, really transform the future of so many girls in this city. So imagine the power of YFlow. I mean, everybody's going to be like, I want to join this movement. And we can start it right here today in this room. This is the role that YFlow can play in Delhi. It can play in India. So let's do it. Let's do it right now. So my dream is that at the end of my term as chairperson, we can help raise through friends, through all of us, up to ₹1 crore to help Empower, which will really, really have a huge impact on the ground. And the good thing is that all of this money goes straight to the program. None of it goes to pay anybody's salaries. And there's going to be a lot of engagement. So you will know what's happening, where it's happening, whose life is getting transformed. So let's join us and, make this change happen today.
Thank you so much, Aradhna. And to that, I want to add on behalf of Empower, our commitment. Our commitment is that we're here for all steps, big or small. We're here for all contributions, big or small. And we're here for the learning. We have pulled together an engagement calendar with YFlow. We want you to meet our partners. We want you to meet the girls that we work with. So we're right here. We're here for the community, which I think I'm going to start calling the sisterhood. We're here for the sisterhood. We're here for the learning. We're here for the collectives. We're here for starting small. All of the themes that we've heard on the panel today. So right now, 3 actions. Okay, action number 1 is I want to introduce you to Tanvi and Jayanti, who are at the back of the room. We're from the Empower team. We're here to answer any questions that you may have. The second is, follow us on socials. We are collaboratively tagged. And the third thing is there's one more piece of paper with you. Okay, so I want us to find the 2 pieces of paper that you wrote on right at the beginning of this panel. Okay, so if that first piece of paper says women and girls, if it says education, livelihoods, and health, we are absolutely here for you. Take that paper, put it in your purse, put it on your desk, stick it inside your laptop bag, and carry it close, because that's what matters to you. Okay. Now we move on to the second piece of paper. We can be very dramatic here if you'd like. That was your challenge. After hearing this panel, who feels that their challenge isn't a challenge anymore? Any show of hands? Not a challenge? So there's newfound inspiration to address that challenge. Take your piece of paper and rip it up if that's true for you. rip up your challenge. You can leave it in this room right now, if that is true for you.
Can I add that, we ran a poll on Instagram that what are the top 4 things that you can help a girl with, to give her a better life. And out of the 4 options, I'm proud to say that our community chose confidence.
Amazing.
40% of the people who responded said confidence. So you already know what the challenge is for a girl to succeed. And
Yeah.
that's exactly where we want to provide the support. So it's fantastic to see that, people are already realizing this and coming forward and talking about it. So we also want to open up for some questions and answers. Members from the committee have mics. If you have a question for our panelists, please raise your
Can I
hand.
start with a question for the...
Vedika has a question, yes.
So my first question is for Atashi. I had a similar experience of being driven out of a village because the work we were doing was changing the power dynamic in that village. So how have you managed to still do so much of impact work with this change that you're creating? And my second question is to Vasvi and Priyanka. How do we embed philanthropy into our kids' DNA from an early on stage?
So that's a nice question. What we did was we did not try to change the culture of the space. We took that as a challenge. What we were trying to do was educate them. I think what was not being acceptable was the women were not reliant on anyone else. They were self-reliant to go, say, catch a bus or go to the bank or count money. We were dealing with women who were not even able to do that. And so we got them to come to the centers. We got them to get the skilling and the education that they needed just to live better, just to live with dignity. It was not about also earning, it was about living with dignity and not just asking for everything. It was very challenging to get them to the center initially, but we succeeded. We did succeed. And then with the word of mouth and cooperative, first it was 20 women, then it reached 50 women. Eventually we did manage to do about 1,500 women in the span of 3 years in Haryana. So that was a small change, but yes.
I really do believe that our children are our best ambassadors for everything, whatever it may be, whether it's the environment, whether it's social impact. So I'm very, very privileged that I get to work in the space of education. I really always think that it is an honor for me to be able to do that. And we work with our school children right from the beginning, from when they come in at 4 years old. There's always something that they can do, whether it is creating money, even by making something like a bookmark, okay, which they almost bully their parents and their friends to buy, and then they take that money and they put it towards some charitable cause. Or it is the 4 brownies that they bring from home, which is again put towards something. Or then it is helping a Mogiyar community, for instance, in Ranthambore, where we work very extensively with our school kids, we're providing a different livelihood for the poachers. Or various initiatives. So in the school, right from day one, social impact, giving back, doing something for others is a very, very big part of what we want to teach our children, along with the environment, which is also a very, very important part of it. The second thing is role modeling. We all have to be role models of what we want our children to actually be. So I could be throwing wrappers on the floor and not doing anything and being unkind to people and not being empathetic and then expect my children to do the exact opposite. That's never going to happen. So we also have to role model what we want them to learn. So we're very proud of our alumni.
I definitely agree with Vasvi that role modeling is perhaps, very, very important because no matter what we say and what we do, but how we conduct ourselves teaches our children far more than anything else. But in the case of my children, I can only talk about my lived experience. And I feel that very early on, I saw that they were inclined towards nature. They would speak to the birds. They would not get, offended if a ladybug touched them. They would want the butterflies nearby. They would like to touch the creepy crawlies. So, I didn't discourage this. I encouraged it. I saw their swabhav, and I tended to sort of, help that grow, because that's what my guru did with me. That's what my parents did with me. They worked according to my prakriti and my swabhav and nurtured that which was very individual inside me. And I was very fortunate to see this early on in my children. And my husband was also very, attuned to this. So a lot of our holidays early on started with jungles. And when they were 8 or 10 years old, they refused to go to cities for holidays after, because they formed such a deep love and bond with the environment. So if I look back, that is one thing I would say, that, we as mothers are custodians of our children's interests. And if we can find what it is that makes them passionate, what is it that makes them smile, what is it that, they want to read about? My children have gorged on National Geographics, and I know it was very boring for me growing up, but they could just sit for hours and hours and hours and watch all these documentaries, right? Because that seed and that love for nature existed, and it was not crushed, and it was allowed to bloom. I think, they made their own tryst with their destiny, but I definitely think if we can identify that and nurture that, that is a very valuable gift that we can pass down to our children.
Hi, I have a question here. So it's for all of you. Sometimes we get emotionally involved with the passion projects that we have and CSR and funding and giving back. And I know 3 of you here, and I know that all of you have been at the ground doing the job. It's not just sitting in a boardroom. How do you stay grounded versus being too emotionally close to a project? And what would you tell us as women that when we take up a project, we don't make it very emotionally, emotion is part of it, but how do we stay grounded on the path rather than making it, the top one thing where it's eating you up, rather than becoming positive, it's becoming negative, and how do you grow that?
So I honestly don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's important to have that passion. It's important to have that emotion. It's important to bring both those to the table. And if you don't do that, then you're never going to start something from scratch. You can fund something, you can support something, but if you really want to start something from scratch, I don't think it's possible without bringing those two things and be consumed with it.
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And I think it's like a startup. You have to be consumed and to be really invested to make a difference. Because it's not just the outward difference, but it's also the fulfillment you get by giving. Because, we think we are giving to others, but really the true giving is to ourselves. Very true. And that only happens if you're 150% inside. It doesn't happen if you remove yourself from that, because it's about you.
I think it's the emotions that drive you. I think it's the feeling that you want to make the change that makes you want to do this and be on the ground. You want to see that change. And that's why you're so emotionally involved.
So if I can add to it, when the cause is higher than yourself, when the vision is bigger than you, then that passion just drives everything, and a challenge becomes an opportunity instead.
Can I also just add one last thing to that, is that sometimes the result of it doesn't show immediately. Like especially if you're working on a systems change, or you're working towards ecosystem building, like for instance, mental health. You will not be able to see that incremental change. It will happen very, very slowly. So if you are bringing that emotion and passion, you're able to sustain. It's not immediately gratifying, but because you have that investment in it, you're able to see through things that are not immediately gratifying.
Yeah, you're able to be much more patient, I think, and philanthropic capital has the capacity to be very patient. And similarly, people in positions of privilege have the capacity to be patient And I think that's a huge value if it's combined with emotion, can be, funding those innovations and risky things which traditional capital wouldn't fund and things like that. So it's a great space to feel the emotion and yet be able to be patient with the result.
Can we do one last question and then we can... The panelists are here for coffee, so you can ask your questions as we move along.
Change my sleep interior designing. But again and again, I really feel that how do we give opportunities to these people? Even if we give them education, we give them all sorts of other things like money, education, and all of that. But they don't have opportunities to represent themselves in the market that is at the moment available. Another thing, learning and understanding starts at home. Their parents are not educated. How much ever we say their environment is not that supportive. So how do we change? Can we change in their homes? Parents or mothers are educated, so are the children. While planning the rural areas also, they have very set patterns every time, and they're not prone to changes. So there and there, our entire objective is not fulfilled. So how do we go about that?
For rural India, I can answer that. I think you have to start. So somewhere it's going to be the first generation. We do a lot of skilling even for older women. We are also doing a lot for the younger ones. You'll be surprised to know we have skill centers. We do tie up. In all the states and villages that we're working in, we actually see the local requirement and it really differs. So in a Gujarat, you wouldn't need to tell them to register plots or land in the women's name. Women are financially very, very independent. But in a place like Chhattisgarh, Odisha, we see a very, very different environment. So we really work according to which rural area we are working in, number one. Number two, I think it's cultural differences as well. So you have to take that as a challenge. You get the right team, you speak their language, you start explaining where it actually matters, maybe, and you have to see where they require you. Sometimes it's as simple as in a scheduled tribe area in Chhattisgarh, 98% of women were losing, the infant mortality was that high. So just hiring, we placed 2 midwives. And as of today, our infant mortality rate in that area is down to 16%. So we have to look at where they require us and where we start educating them, whether it is about self-health, taking care of children, health, diet. It's where you start. You have to start somewhere. And you'll see the change gradually. Of course, that is when we said that when you're measuring it, today we can measure it over the last 20 years and see an impact in the area.
I can quickly add to that is very often when we talk about women and girls and livelihoods programming, we look at the woman or the woman alone or the girl alone. And the burden of change for too long has been placed on women and girls, right? We have to look the whole ecosystem. What is her household saying? What is her family saying? And the way I always think of it is traditionally how programming has been done is we're telling girls ki like aap sab kuch kar sakte ho, aap duniya badal sakte ho, everything's amazing, and it's like sending girls up a diving board to say you can jump off the top of the highest diving board there is, but nobody's checking to see if there's water in the swimming pool, right? And I think that's what you're saying is so profound is what do family units look like? What do communities look like? What do needs look like? Because that's what's really going to change things.
I just want to add one thing that, even if you look at something simple like Maslow's triangle, there are different needs and those needs vary. The need of an urban child in a slum is very different from a rural child in a thriving village or in a community which is very patriarchal. I mean, we work in rural India in 12 states and we have 11,000 non-formal schools. And I see a difference in the statistics from each school. The kind of children who are coming there, their requirements, their empowerment is just off the charts. I mean, you cannot compare one to the other. So there is no one formula for our villages and our rural India. And I think we have to assess what is it that is required on the local level for implementation and not expect for like a one standard solution, because I don't think that exists.
I'll just take from there because I didn't talk about the corporate part we do. We actually work across 26 locations in 2,000 villages, and we actually monitor each family with skilling, and we say that, you know, if you make 25,000 this year, how can we up it more the next year, and so on and so forth. We run 33 Diksha centers where we skill women, and we skill women based on what is available in that area. So in UP, we use the moonj grass, and we teach them with something that is easily available to them, which is not too expensive to them, and we skill them on how to weave. So those are skills that they can take on to their homes and work. So depending on what everyone said, on the community, on the culture of that space, we skill people. And that we've seen makes a huge difference.
So, Mannat, actually, that's a great question that you asked. And that dilemma is exactly what we are trying to help with. That, you know, these are skills that, you know, like Nisha said, you can't tell a woman that aap dunya badal sakte ho, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't have the confidence. She doesn't have the environment. So those are exactly the programs that we're trying to work on at YFlow this year. That how can we help her become a leader, not just for herself, but in her community, and lift her whole community up and empower others in her community so that everybody is talking the same language. It's not her alone. The burden is not falling on her alone. So I'm sure like we'll be able to guide you as well in your journey. So happy to hear that question. And can we please have Urvi now to...
Committee member at YFlow Delhi. A huge thank you to all our panelists and to Nisha for this really, really insightful discussion. As a philanthropy enthusiast, I'm always looking for, you know, data, knowledge, and understanding of the why, how, what of giving. And the discussion today has given me a lot of food for thought on how each one of us can truly create a transformative change. And I hope it's been the same for all of you. I want to now thank our entire committee and especially my co-day chair, Vedika Agarwal, for putting together this perfect event. A big round of applause, please, for the entire committee. YFlow also thanks our platinum sponsor, GHCL, our gifting sponsors, Art Denox, our F&B sponsors, 93 Degrees Coffee Roasters and Sweet Little Things Bakery, our venue partners at the Travancore Palace, our creative and communication partners, the Communication Council and Grey Goose Design, and our event management partners, Tatastu Events. I would now like to invite Mrs. Jayanti Dalmia, past President Flow, to please come on stage to felicitate our panelists and our moderator. Thank you. A huge thank you to Nisha Dhawan, Vice President of Empower, to Vasvi Bharatram, okay, we're not going in the order. A big thank you to Priyanka Agarwal, Avantika Dalmia, and to Atashi Singhania. Thank you for all your constant support and encouragement, all of you. Huge thank you to Nisha for beautifully moderating the discussion. Thank you, members and friends of YFlow, for joining us this evening. We hope to keep inspiring you this year so that we all may thrive more at YFlow. Please join us over coffee to take this conversation